chug, 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 chug,
Hello and welcome back to the Wizard Staff. I'm your host Guy.
And I'm Blake.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly before playing children's card games. Welcome back to the very first episode of the Wizard Staff for the 2021 New Year. Woo! 2020 didn't kill us, even though it tried really, really hard to.
We're gonna try and stay as healthy as possible this year too.
Yep. We took a short break, as we noted at the end of our 2020 end of the year review, just to take some time off for the holidays. We got a lot that's going to be coming up with Kaldheim. We're in the middle of spoilers right now. Pretty exciting stuff. It's a pretty metal set, as WotC has promised us. And tonight we are going to just be going over, kind of casually, like, what are some of the best tools for deck building online in like a one-on-one kind of scenario. So we're all very familiar. We all have built decks before. We're familiar with the internet webs, and we are just going to be going over what are some of our favorites and what are some kind of like the advantages and disadvantages to using them, and then going over a few other tools that I think players will commonly use when they're building a deck online, like the Gatherer, Scryfall, EDH Rec. We'll touch a little bit on like Reddit and Facebook, but those are like a whole different thing, so we're not gonna talk about that too much. And then maybe a little bit about TCG Player and Card Kingdom as well.
Going back to what you said earlier, that's a good way of framing it, that these are all tools that each kind of website or thing that we're going to talk about here tonight, they definitely have their strengths and their weaknesses, and it's up to you to kind of use the best from each of those to help you make decks.
For sure, and that's definitely something that I think players need to kind of familiarize themselves with each one, and they can kind of like weigh their different options. I was kind of someone who just, started using one, and that was really the only one I knew about for a while, and so that's how I got used to it. But definitely use this kind of episode as kind of a reference guide. Maybe you're stuck between a couple, or you're not liking the one that you're using right now, so you might want to switch. Alright, and before we get into the episode, Blake, what are you drinking tonight?
Well, I am drinking Wanderland Nectarine Ale by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. I don't know, it just looked very colorful, looked very happy, very bright, and I just wanted something to kind of cheer me up, and I don't really see nectarine ales that very often. Definitely tastes a little bit sweet. I like it. I'm enjoying it.
And when you say nectarine ale, is it kind of like a honey flavor, or like I'm trying to imagine like what the base of that is?
I mean, I imagine they have hops in here and a little bit of fruit. I don't see an ingredients list, but I don't know, they've got a nectarine on the label, so.
Okay. Well, I'm just drinking a Not Your Father's root beer. I realized shortly before we started recording that I didn't have time to go pick out an alcohol this week, so I was just picking something that was already in my fridge and has been in my fridge for quite some time. And it's been quite some time because I think it's still the same Not Your Father's root beer from when we did the interview with Brayden in the EDH cast.
That was so long ago, dude.
I know. It still tastes okay. I was like very cautious.
That was so long ago. That was fun though. That was fun.
Yeah, it tastes good. I think it's probably at, its limits, and I only have one or two left, so I'm just going to try and finish them tonight. Yeah. Alright, so we've all been in this situation before where, we want to build a deck, and we're trying to find a way of categorizing our cards and picking down the choices, because oftentimes players will not just pick 100 cards for a deck, but it's more that you'll pick maybe like 125. Yeah, something like that where, you want to have options and you kind of want to, take one card out, maybe put this one in, see how that, balances itself, It's a good to experiment. You just don't want to commit to 100 right away and call it a day. That rhymed. Pretty cool. So, here are some deck building websites that we have used or kind of mixed.
I say that the top 4.
Yeah, I guess the top 4 that are most commonly used. Blake and I did both use all of these to build a deck and kind of familiarize ourselves with the websites at first. And you see it all the time too when someone posts a new deck list. It really is all about preference, and we'll just say that here. We're not going to tell you what's the best deck building website, but we're just going to give you kind of a rundown of each one, and maybe you can pick from there. So this first one is the one that I'm most familiar with, and it's the one that I use all the time. It's Tapped Out, which is pretty nice. One of the biggest advantages that I have found to using it is I can write out all my cards and just do this big copy and paste right into this little text box, and it'll find all the cards that I want, and it's pretty quick and efficient. There are several other features that you can toggle on and off as you're building your deck, which kind of just gives reference for yourself or for anyone else who's going to view the deck. So there's the land cost, inner and outer, so it's showing you the pips in your cards versus the pips that your lands create.
I like that feature.
Yeah, there is this nice little tool where it says you can flag your deck saying this is kind of in the early stages. Can I get some help, please? And people can look at it, write down some comments. This one I wrote down because it's the only website that I've seen use it, and I'm a little indifferent about it now, but it's the competitive meter, which is a bar that is blue and orange, and it shows you where your deck kind of lands on the casual side versus competitive side. And I will say it is a little confusing sometimes because, I will put in a deck and the CMC, average CMC will be pretty low, and, it'll have really powerful cards, but it'll tell me that the deck is 82% casual, and I'm how did you arrive at that number? That's very interesting.
Yeah, I actively dislike this feature. I think it oftentimes is misleading in terms of the social connotation of what Commander players believe to mean competitive versus casual. And I just think it is more than just neutral. I think it actively kind of confuses people, and for that reason I don't like that feature. It kind of flattens the concept of what something is competitive. It really just looks at your CMC curve, and it's oh, is it low? It's competitive. Oh, is it high? It's casual. That's really what it does, and it's never that simple. There are so many more nuances to what actually makes a deck competitive or casual. It's not that simple.
Yeah, there have been times where I've taken a card out and then the bar drops 50%, and I'm I don't think that this had that much of an effect on it, so it's weird. Would definitely like to hear more thoughts about how it works. But let's see. Okay, playtest features allow you to draw 7 and play through several turns. I think this is actually a pretty common feature.
It is a common feature.
Yeah. Writing primers in Tapped Out I think is very easy, and it's laid out pretty nicely. You can kind of kind of accordion the primer in a way that allows you to only show the text that you want to read at the time.
Yeah, because some primers can become very, very long, and in order to combat that, you make these various sections that can collapse in on themselves. So when you first view it, it's all there on the page, and if you want to learn more about a certain section or topic, you can click on it and expand it a whole bunch. And that is one feature I really do like.
not all decks are going to have a primer, so it does kind of depend on what deck you are viewing. Just keep that in mind. Another nice feature shows you the ratio of cards, your mana curve, and like we said, the land-based color. You can get your list of tokens that your cards create, the average CMC, and how often the deck is being used. So it'll show you like when's the last time someone updated this deck, or when was it last put in. And then when you input a deck into Tapped Out, you can include different channels for when people go to search for those. And it's not crazy. I like how you can limit it to, I think it's 5 channels, where that helps, really hone in what are the key things about a deck. So it's not just like any deck can have like every single channel and it's just going to pop up everywhere for visibility. You really do need to like think about what is the deck about and where do I want it to be popping up among other decks.
So when you say channel, that confuses me a little bit, and I think tags is a more helpful thing.
Yes, okay. Tags is kind of what I mean by that.
Could you like give an example?
Yeah, so for my Purphoros, I do like mono red, burn, token. Those are probably the main things about the deck that I want people to know, and I want it to be clumped in with other decks, so that way if I do want to go search for something that is related to mono red or burn, it'll be among those decks, and then I can like compare and contrast.
Okay.
Yeah. I will say, so some of the disadvantage, it does feel a little broken in comparison to the other sites. It's just a little slow and feels kind of clunky. There's a lot going on the screen, and that's just very overwhelming to look at. We'll include some visuals on like our YouTube video for this, so you can see for yourself. Or, I mean, if you do go and use tappedout.com, you'll definitely see on there as well.
The reason that is because of all of these deck building websites we're listing, Tapped Out is probably the oldest one, and they just haven't quite been able to, kind of keep it up to the modern day. They haven't done quite the maintenance needed for it to not be buggy.
Yeah, I think people have been able to like learn from Tapped Out's strengths and weaknesses and build some better deck building sites. I'll probably be moving on from Tapped Out here shortly, just because I sometimes get frustrated with, going back and forth with building stuff. Yeah, I will say, I guess, another thing about Tapped Out that is nice, or I guess depends on what your version of nice is, but whenever you do search for a deck, I do think that Tapped Out comes up as the most recent searches, or it's like normally like one of the first 2 searches, so it is definitely still being used.
Like a Google search?
Yeah,
I'd say so, just because it's like so old that it has a ton of deck lists. I think that's the main reason why, if you do a generic Google search or whatever, that it usually pops up with Tapped Out deck lists first.
Okay, so that was Tapped Out. Next we have Moxfield. Blake, do you want to go over this one a little? Or can I lead?
Sure, I can talk about this one for a little bit. So this is one of the more recent deck building websites that came around. I'd say it's really started to gain popularity within the last year and a half, I would say. Starting like mid 2019, I'd say. There are a lot of advantages. If you, like in CDH, any deck that runs ad nauseum needs to be really careful about like looking at their mana curve. So Moxfield will kind of say like, this is your CMC, not accounting for ad nause, because ad nause is like a 5 CMC spell, but like you don't really care about that. Like you care about all the other spells and their CMCs. So that's a really nice feature. That's why like ad nause being such a prominent card in the CEDH meta. It's a super nice feature for them. It's also just a really robust, formulated website with all of its like features. It's very aesthetically pleasing. website to look at, in my opinion.
In comparison to Tapped Out, which just has so much going on, Moxfield definitely feels like a more clean, cut the fat, and here are the important things that you need to look at.
Another nice thing about Moxfield is that it seems a little bit more social in the fact that you can follow certain like deck creators and kind of filter and search that way by actually following like certain users, certain deck builders.
I do think when I am on Twitter or Facebook, where people often share their decks, it definitely is, I think, the one that's coming up most often now. And I think if you are friends with someone through this game, it is kind of another way of having that social media platform. You can follow each other, see when people post new decks, comment, like, subscribe kind of thing. That's me subliminally messaging everyone here to comment, like, and subscribe to our podcast. If you haven't already.
Real subtle there. Another advantage to Moxfield is that like almost all of the decks on their website are commander based. So unlike Tapped Out or Mtg Goldfish, it is really easy to browse through without like having to filter through, like get rid of all that modern stuff, all that vintage stuff. Get out of here. Nobody wants that. So that's a nice thing.
I will say the site is definitely geared for what feels like Commander. I have gone through decks and have seen like a few modern decks and a few pauper decks pop up.
Oh yeah, they exist.
They exist on the website, so we're not saying like, oh, none exist on the website at all. It's just that most people who are using this website, I think, are going to be using it for EDH.
Let's see, another nice thing about this is that on their homepage, similar to Scryfall, which we'll talk about later, they have a link to ongoing previews. So it's quick and easy access to see like what the latest new cards are. I think that's a nice helpful feature. Kind of gets people on their website.
Yeah. Kind of keeps you wanting to come back every day to see like what is, what was just recently spoiled,
If you choose to use this as like your spoiler viewing website. And also we have the fact that it seems like this website is constantly being like worked on and improved. I've seen like people message Moxfield on like Twitter and like they'll help them out, and someone will ask like, hey, is this a feature that exists? And Moxfield will be like, no, but like we made it after like spending a day on it. So that's really cool. Their team seems pretty on it.
Yeah, I do like how their team is very social and responsive. It feels very collaborative in that way with the community. They're trying to build the best deck building website for us, and I think the best way for them to do that is by reaching out or listening to their audiences. So it seems like they're doing a very good job with that. And because they're so new and they have like all their links readily available, it's very easy to find them and, just have a chat about that.
Yeah, so no website is perfect. There are some disadvantages to Moxfield, but honestly, there aren't that many. Like, for me, this is like the Achilles heel, is that it's a little hard to search for decks by commander. There's not really a feature for that. Like, I can't just go in and type in Sigarda Host of Herons decks. Like, there's not really a feature for that. A lot of their search engine is based off of tags, or as Guy was saying earlier, channels. That's how a lot of their search engine is done, and that is helpful, but I would like, in addition to that, a search feature that searches by commander. But other than that, there's not really many other disadvantages.
I will say, I think that this is kind of another nice feature about that, of Moxfield, and because oftentimes CEDH players will be putting their deck lists on there, I feel that they are more passionate and want to talk about how their decks work a lot more, so they'll include primers more often with their decks, so you can click on a little, like, I think it's like a info button, and it'll say like read the primer.
Yep.
And it's just there. You can read about most of like the competitive decks, or like people who are definitely actively on that website all the time, because they want you to read it, want you to understand how the deck plays for sure.
Yeah, that's just EDH players in general. They're a little bit better about like updating their decks and writing primers that are more than like 10 words.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, like, I'm just gonna say, like, I've been thinking about moving my deck lists onto Moxfield. Not sure if I'm gonna do it. Might happen, might not. Still thinking about it. Alright, Guy. Do you want to talk about the next deck building website we have?
Yeah, it's Mtg Goldfish. So Mtg Goldfish is similar to the deck building reference website that we all know as EDH Rec. And we'll get into EDH Rec a little bit more in a minute, but where MTG Goldfish kind of like prevails over EDH Rec, you can like put in actual deck lists and view it on their website. They have podcasts, they have articles as well. It is very nice because, again, it does feel like a very social thing, and it's kind of like you can subscribe to their content, listen, very active with their followers. I know Saffron Olive is one of the kind of like
their figureheads.
Premier, of MTG Goldfish. If you haven't heard of him, then I don't know if you've been playing Magic enough.
They've been living under a rock.
Yeah. And they've been around for quite a while, so they've been able to make a reputation for themselves like that, and you can, again, you can find their content pretty much everywhere, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, and they update almost, like, daily, or if not, like, weekly. It's a good all-in-one kind of place.
It does a lot of different things.
Yes, they've been able to branch out, and I think that's quite nice. And this site, between all of them, seems the best for those who care more about like the prices of their cards and can look at the cards on like the rise and fall and filter by different sets of, when did a card spike or when did a card appear on the market, that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm. As I was using this website for the first time, because I don't usually use this website, I noticed a few things. I noticed that, most websites will have deck lists broken down into permanent types, so they'll have like creatures, instants, sorceries, planeswalkers, lands, etc., etc. But like, MTG Goldfish does this, but they slam all the instants and sorceries together and categorize it as spell. And I don't know, that just irks me. It's like you separate all these other kinds of permanents, or card types, I should say, but you smush these two together and call them spells. It just it's not that big of a deal, but it irks me. It irks me so much.
It is kind of a big deal when you are trying to look at like the different sorts of interactions in the deck. I would say that for something that seems so small and easy to do, especially when you do it with all your other types of cards, it definitely feels like it's something that can be like split out.
Yes. And I think the major other complaint I have about MTG Goldfish and their deck building website is that it feels incredibly like bare bones compared to a lot of these other sites. Like, there's no room for you to write a primer. There's no comment section that I could find, like, so other people can't like leave a comment or ask you any sort of question. It didn't have a lot of the bells and whistles like a mana curve chart. It didn't have like the color pip percentage like a lot of other deck building websites have. It just felt very, very bare bones.
Yes, I agree. Those are kind of I guess those aren't like necessary for when you're building a deck. I guess, well,
I find them incredibly important.
I'd say that they're important, but it is kind of like you said, it's like the bells and whistles. They're like nice add-ons. So if you're a very visual person, I think that helps for those kind of people, but I don't think that's everyone. So
I don't know, I consider it a standard. of any deck building website to have a mana curve and like color pip percentage chart. I think that's just that should just be a standard.
For me, I guess it's like, if that's not something that somebody wants to see for some reason, it's not there. But I guess what would be nice is if you could toggle it on and off. Like, if you didn't want that feature, you could say like, oh, stop showing me this. This is too much information for me to like look at. But that's not the case. Yeah. Alright, we got one more deck building website that we're going to talk about. And it's Blake's favorite.
So should I talk about it?
No, Blake. We're gonna just skip over it because it's useless.
All right. So this website is Architect, and like Guy said, this is the one I'm currently using. It is similar to Moxfield. It's one of the more newish websites that's been coming out. It's gained a lot of popularity within the last 2 years, I'd say. And it is a bit of a plain layout, kind of like Mtg Goldfish. You can create custom categories for your cards, which is like the notable thing about this deck building website is that you can like, most websites it's like, okay, all the cards, we're gonna organize them based on card type. And you can do that in Architect, but you can also just like say, fuck it, I'm going to name categories whatever I want and put cards wherever I want. And this is both a blessing and a curse, because it can be really helpful in situations like mine where it's like I have a Sigarda deck and I don't necessarily want to organize my cards in the usual way. I want to create categories like lands, ramp, card advantage, recursion, protection, removal, tutors, etc., like categories that describe the effects of my cards, rather. And by organizing them in that way, I think it makes the viewer who's unfamiliar with this deck understand the deck better that way than the traditional way. But at the same time, you can also have it backfire on you, where I've done this so many times before, while I'll pull open it, I'll just be browsing through, looking at other people's deck lists, and they have like 30 categories, and it's just too many categories, and like they'll just be like ridiculously specific, and it's just a fucking mess. It's just all over the place, and it's just awful and unreadable, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? I can't look at this.
You say you can break out your deck into ramp, card advantage, recursion, protection, removal. You can break them out into these different categories, so when people look at your deck, they know like what the card kind of like falls into the category of.
Right.
Is that something that's really easy for you to do and feels intuitive when you're building the deck on the website?
Well, for me, yes, because I've like made the deck in paper and I want to upload it online, and so I already kind of know like, oh, this is my Enchantress draw engine. I'm gonna put all these Enchantress cards in the card advantage section that I have, and just kind of do that with all my cards. Like, okay, this goes under the land section, this goes under the protection section. So for me, and the way my mind works, I find that to be a more helpful organization than the usual way.
Okay, because I mean, I asked that because I do know that that's a feature on Tapped Out, but I've never been able to like figure it out or been able to do it in a way where I feel comfortable knowing that I will be able to recover the deck afterwards. I don't want to feel like I'm gonna break the deck or like go so far down that I would have to like start all over again. Mm-hmm. So it's just nice to know that when you're building a deck and you want to break it out this way, that's easier for you to do on this website than, say, something like Tapped Out.
Yeah, and again, that's one of the signature features about Architect, is that you can do this, and I think that's part of the reason why it's semi-successful.
I'm interrupting Blake here for just a quick second, because shortly after we recorded this episode, Moxfield released a new feature where they were able to simulate the same thing that Architect is doing, where you can organize your cards by different categories. So, in order to not look stupid and cover our tracks, here I am, in post-production, making ourselves clear. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, it does have all the usual features like the mana curve chart, the playtesting feature, etc., etc. I think they just added a Rex feature that is connected to EDH Rec. I think that's a new feature too. So they are also, similar to Moxfield, constantly updating and adding new things to it.
Okay. So those are the 4 main websites that we're going to talk about for deck building. But that's not just the only thing that you use when you are building a deck. I'd say that that's kind of actually step 2. And step 1 would actually be tools where you can find cards for your decks. So the first one and the most notable one, because I think it's now just a common practice that you go to EDH Rec whenever you want to build a deck as kind of a good starting point. It's the most well-known site for deck building, and you can find any legendary creature or partner pairing, and then you are given the most common cards used in all decks across Tapped Out, Moxfield, Goldfish, etc., and told what percentage of them use that card and then their overall synergy with the deck. So it nicely breaks down the cards into several categories, from most common, newest additions, then it goes into the card types. So something that feels more new recently that I've noticed that they've been doing is they've broken out their artifacts into utility versus ramp, and the same thing with their lands. So utility relating more to the commander's strategy, and then ramp for ramping. So it's telling you, these are meant for getting you more mana, and these are relating to making your creature unblockable, giving it hexproof, whatever. And then you can view a commander in different themes as well. So generally when you first click on the commander's site, it'll just give you overall across all categories. But then you can easily break it down into, what you're trying to hone in on. So, for example, Atraxa, you could find Infect, Super Friends, Proliferate, Counters Matter, and choose which one of those you want to look at, and then pick the cards from those kind of decks so that you focus on only that for your experience. I guess, and the one downside to using EDH Rec in my mind is that the cards that pop up on a commander's page are very dependent on what other people put in their decks. So if enough people include bad cards that you wouldn't want to run in your deck, then you are going to have a hard time kind of filtering through that cloud.
Right, I think you and I both have decks that, based on how we want to build a commander, our cards are not even on the recommended, or they're at the bottom, and you're why is this so low? This should clearly be it's almost a staple in this specific commander deck. Why is it not higher? So sometimes you run into those situations. So it is a good reminder that EDH Rec is very, very useful, but it is not a true reflection of reality. It's not all-knowing and perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, this gathers data from deck building websites, and there are players who play Commander, but they're never going to post on their decks online. They're never going to put in that kind of effort because maybe they're just not that invested, or they just don't want to. So EDH Rec is not a true, complete reflection of reality. You always got to, like almost everything in life, you got to take it with a grain of salt. You got to always be a little bit critical.
Yeah. I would think a nice feature that EDH Rec would add is the ability to actually build decks on their website, but I guess that's not something that they're interested in.
I don't know, give it a year or two, it might happen.
Maybe. Oh, and I guess the other great thing about EDH Rec, as we've mentioned with Mtg Goldfish, but they have articles that come out almost on the daily, They have the EDH Redcast, which comes out also pretty weekly, I'm pretty sure. And then I think a nice thing that, we've talked about how we want to do, but we can't just yet. But once you reach a certain kind of like status in the community, you get your content featured on this like channel of theirs that, just pops up, oh, who's posted something most recently, and then, if you're on the website and you're just looking for something to watch, you can easily like click on it and then, give it a watch. Yeah. So next we have the Gatherer, and Blake, you're going to talk about this one because you spent, I don't know how many hours, but you went through the entire Gatherer system, haven't you?
Yeah, I've looked up every single Commander legal card before. I just was bored for a few days, and I just would spend a couple hours each day going through that. Is that what you mean?
Yep. So you know it best.
I don't know if that's true. But, yeah, so there's the Gatherer, and it is a website that is made by Wizards of the Coast, the creators of this game. And I kind of forget, like, when you first go to Gatherer, it automatically goes to simple search. Fuck that. You go to advanced search, baby. Just go to advanced search. And I would recommend anyone who is just, like, if I could, like, speak to every new player of Commander, if I could convince them to just learn advanced search in Gatherer, I would be so happy, because it is kind of difficult at first, but it's totally worth it in the long run. It is just, in my opinion, it is the best way to search up cards.
I mean, in my mind, Scryfall is probably the best one, just in terms of like how easy it is to search through, but it is also nice because you can just type in, for example, can't gain life into like Google search Mtg, and then it will give you like the Gatherer search database for all cards that say can't gain life, so that's pretty nice. I have used Gatherer for most of my decks in that kind of way, where I want to kind of make it initially like a little larger of a search. So for example, when I was working on Pilaf, I looked at all the types of plant creatures there were and then started narrowing it more to the specific ones that worked well with counters, since that's something that Pilaf does. Though, spoiler alert, didn't really do too well just because there's not a lot of good plant cards in Magic. But you get the idea. And I guess the other nice thing too is you do have very specific rulings on cards, because it is, WotC's website. They can update the rulings on cards and kind of explain different scenarios that are probably like frequently asked questions about cards. So if you're confused about something, just go on Gatherer, look it up, and it's probably going to answer you right there.
Yeah, that's another reason why I like it, is because it includes those rulings. And again, the reason I think it's the best way to search up cards is because it just provides you with the most options in which to specify your search. It does like CMC, the text, the card type, the artist, etc., etc., etc. There's just a long list of ways you can filter in which you search. So for that reason alone, I like it, and I would really love it if more people used it.
Alright, so this next one is one that we've mentioned many a times now, but Scryfall, and it's similar to Gatherer, where you can filter through your searches. However, the greatest part about it is that they have it laid out very easily, where you can find the most recent sets and search through previews. So they're actively putting up cards during preview, and they'll also like link to where those previews get shown, which is pretty cool.
That is nice.
Gatherer, I think, typically puts, if say like for Kaldheim, all the cards get spoiled, they'll wait till the very end to update their database.
Right.
Yeah. But off to the right-hand side, you can find the various different sets that the card has been in, and you can, look through all the different arts that have been used and kind of do like a price comparison for those as well. And gives you like recommended links for where you could buy them. What I would say, there's not really a huge downside, though the one advantage to using Gatherer over Scryfall is that, again, Gatherer includes all those rules text under the card, so yeah, I guess that's something that's really important to you. Because their search engines work somewhat similar. I think just Scryfall is a little more aesthetically pleasing to look at.
I would agree with that. Gatherer is very dark and black and can get hard to look at if you're scrolling for a long time.
Yeah, and it feels like tapped out in a way where it is very... It's not like broken, but it feels a little more janky, where I feel Scryfall feels more smooth when you're using it. But yeah, Scryfall does provide you a link to the Gatherer's page, so if you do need to reference a card real quick, you can just click on that, but you're then opening up a bunch of tabs, and I know that's something not a lot of people like to do. I will say, if you're interested in ever making content on YouTube or any other visual platform, this is probably the best place to go and find high quality images, and you can easily copy and paste text down in the right hand corner.
Yes, I wish more people knew about Scryfall who do videos on YouTube, because it's I'm tired of looking at white square corners on your card images. Just use Scryfall, please.
Yeah, for sure. I think the last thing that I would like to note is all the cards also have whether or not they're on the reserved list, which feels like a small thing to note, but can be very important.
Yeah, and on that note, actually, there is one search feature that's in Scryfall that I really love, and that is not on Gatherer, and that is the criteria section. And it's categories of cards that you can't really search in Gatherer, like reserved list. You get to see all the reserved list cards. There's ETB, there's all the cards that enter the battlefield and have an effect. There's just a whole bunch. There's flip cards, foreign, white border, just full art. Just certain categories that exist if you play a long time, but they aren't easily searchable in Gatherer. So, yeah, I love that. I really like using the criteria section.
Alright, I haven't used that before, but I will have to look into that a little bit next time I'm going to go search for some cards. And then we have two more kind of categories that we want to quickly go over, but we got Facebook and Reddit kind of clumped together, and we're including these because I think most often people will use these for deck building reference. I mean, here's a pet peeve of mine between you and me, Blake, but I hate it when people will just immediately post a commander on Facebook that was spoiled 5 minutes ago and say what are some auto includes? Bitch, shut the fuck up. The card's been out for 5 minutes. Nobody's had time to think about this yet. So I know that you're excited, but the way that you're just phrasing it is annoys me.
Yeah. Also, don't say auto include. There's almost no such thing. That's a pet peeve of mine. People who say auto include too much.
Oh, but yeah, Facebook and Reddit. So those are a beast of their own.
Yeah.
As a website, but it is nice because you really do get social interaction with other people and can kind of talk through things with them. It feels a little more immediate than, just putting a deck list onto a website and then hoping someone comments, because they're not going to take the time.
Right,
but if you're in
exactly.
a Facebook group that, talks about Magic every day, you're likely to find someone, whether or not it's the advice you're looking for, someone will comment, and then you can, pick their brain, or at least get another starting point of where you kind of want to go with that.
Whether it's helpful or not, someone will comment quickly.
Yeah. And the last two, just to quickly mention as well, is TCG Player and Card Kingdom. And you might be thinking, but those aren't really deck building tools, and you're right and wrong. They're not the place that you want to go to start with, for sure. But as you are going through your deck that you are about to build and looking at all the cards that you're about to buy, these two are great because you can compare the different prices, you can see all the different versions of a card, and kind of like pick based on that. You can really customize what you want and then see like a price for that.
Oh, what's this Wheel of Fortune card? It's $300. Maybe I'll take that out of my deck and play something else then.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the websites that we talked about do include like price features, but you know, they give you kind of the average where, you know, if you do go on to TCG Player or Card Kingdom, you can kind of toggle back and forth with where you're going to buy a card, because one card might be damaged, and if it doesn't matter to you, that card might be significantly less than what other websites are claiming it to be as.
So as we get to the end here, just want to remind everyone, these are all tools. They all have their benefits and their downsides. It's really up to you to use the most from each of these and suit whatever your needs are.
Yeah, and I will say too, we didn't go into every single detail about each of these. That would just take up way too much time.
Yeah.
These are just meant to be kind of a general overview of all that. So
yeah, go explore for yourself.
Yes, it really is kind of a you pick for yourself and what you're most comfortable with. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Alright, so with that, we are the Wizard Staff Podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to leave a like and review. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WizardStaff101. Send us an email at thewizardstaff101@gmail.com if you want to bitch and complain about how stupid we are. Thank you all for listening, and we hope you have a great night. Thank you again for tuning in. We hope 2021 is going to be a great year for Magic, and we'll see you for Kaldheim soon. Peace.
Peace.